Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's Ask the Arc. Tonight, we're going to talk about, what it was like, when your child has just been diagnosed and what you do next. I've been talking to a lot of families lately, and especially as I've been out and around the state, doing community resource fairs and school transition fairs and all of that. I've been talking to more of those families who have younger children who have just been diagnosed and who are trying to figure out what they do next. Or I'm talking to those families who maybe their child is older and has just been diagnosed. And it's more of a surprise because, they've been able to pass until they're 8, 9, 10 years old before they finally, get that diagnosis. And those families always feel very overwhelmed and they're not sure what those next steps are. Because let's be honest, when you have a child with a disability, when they are diagnosed, you're given a list of like 983 things to do. And that's overwhelming. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about tonight is my child's just been diagnosed. Now what? My name is Carly Shortino Poulter, and I'm the director of the ARC Advocacy Network at the ARC of Indiana. And I want to welcome you tonight and thank you for joining us. But in addition to being the director of the Advocacy Network, I'm also a fellow parent. I have a 23-year-old son with autism and a 17-year-old son who doesn't. And my son was diagnosed 1 month after his third birthday, exactly 1 month after his third birthday. It's been 20 years. I still remember that day. And it doesn't go away. Those feelings you have when you hear that diagnosis. But you know what? It's not a death sentence either. Life continues, and it's about what happens next that makes that big difference. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. You are welcome to put your questions in the Q&A, and we will get to those along the way. I will politely remind you that we're going to be discussing all of these things, so you might want to be a little careful in how much personal information you give. But I want you to ask your questions. And if you are one of those families who has a child who has been recently diagnosed, or maybe you have somebody new in your life who may be older and has been diagnosed for a while, but it's new to you, and you're trying to figure out, what's next, what's out there and available, how do I deal with this? Go ahead and ask your questions as we go along tonight. We are recording this session and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. So again, make sure you understand that as you're asking your questions. But let's go ahead and get started. So my child's just been diagnosed. Now what? Well, getting that diagnosis alone can be a huge process. For some people, it's a really long road because they start recognizing that something's just a little different. Something's a little off, and they're not really sure what it is. And sometimes, they can start asking people. They might ask their doctor, or they might ask other parents. And sometimes, their doctor may be like, "Oh no, it's not a big deal. Boys develop late. Don't worry about it." Or you hear that from other friends or from family members. Um, but yet, oftentimes there's still something nagging that something's just a little different. We need something's going on. And so for a lot of families, it can take a long time to get that diagnosis. Sometimes it's fighting to actually get the evaluation. Sometimes it's fighting with the insurance company to pay for that diagnosis, but it can be a long road. And then when you finally get that diagnosis, it can hit really hard. Like I said, it's been 20 years and I still remember that day. I still remember sitting in that doctor's office and hearing that my son has autism and hearing all of the things that they were telling me. Because oftentimes what happens is you're only hearing the worst case scenario and you are inundated with the message, your child will never live independently. Your child will never be able to manage finances. You will always have to control their money. Your child will never be able to get married or have children of their own. They'll never work. They'll never graduate from high school or go to college. They'll never be able to read. And you hear those messages from authority figures. So you hear it from doctors and teachers and therapists, and you hear it from other family members, and you hear it from friends. And if you notice, I have that in quotes because somebody who's constantly telling you that your child will never be able to do anything, I don't know if they're really a friend. And you hear it from strangers on the street who feel perfectly entitled to get into your business and start dictating to you about you and your family's life. And you will constantly hear, oh, your child is going to need complete care. They have to have 24-hour care. They can never be left alone. Oh, they'll need daily hands-on care. They'll need constant supervision. Um, they'll need placement. I have to admit, that's probably one of my biggest triggering words is placement. Um, you'll hear, oh, they'll need a group home when they're older, or maybe, depending on what state you're originally from, they'll need to be placed in an institution. Thankfully, Indiana doesn't have institutions anymore, but there are plenty of states who still do. And so there are lots of people who will tell you that your child needs to be placed in an institution. And of course, you must get full guardianship. And you know what? Those are the messages you hear and you hear constantly, and they're complete nonsense. People with disabilities can do all sorts of things. Yes, they can graduate high school. They might get a certificate of completion, but yes, people with disabilities can get high school diplomas. They can even get honors diplomas if they're able to do that. Yes, people with disabilities can absolutely work, and they make great employees. They are wonderful employees because they always show up. They show up on time. They do their job. And research has shown that when companies hire people with disabilities, that recidivism goes down, that attendance goes up, that productivity goes up. So people with disabilities make great employees and they make everyone around them better. People with disabilities can own their own businesses. And there are all sorts of programs and supports available to help them own their own businesses and still have services at the same time. People with disabilities can buy their own home. Yes, they can have romantic relationships and they can get married. And most importantly, people with disabilities can have a good life. And it starts with high expectations. Because the reality is, if you don't have high expectations, nobody else is going to have high expectations either. And it can feel hard to maintain those high expectations when everyone around you, especially all of those authority figures, are telling you your child will never. But you know what? We have to have those high expectations because if our expectations aren't high, they're never going to meet them. And they may not be able to meet them, but by golly, they're going to try. So if our expectations are up here, they're going to work really hard to get there. But if our expectations are down here, why would they do more than that? So we need to start with high expectations. And that means that we need to insist on trying things. You know, believe it or not, there are some schools who will take a student off of diploma track in kindergarten. Seriously, in kindergarten. And if you're not even going to attempt to educate a child in kindergarten, they're never going to learn. You know, and the school never says it like, oh, well, we're taking your child off diploma track. What they say are things like, we're going to focus on job skills. We're going to focus on independent living skills. Those are great skills to focus on, but you need to teach them how to read too, or at least try to. And so we need to insist on trying. We need to insist that they get the opportunity to try to do the things that everybody else does. Now, in doing so, we've also got to make sure that we're building in the appropriate supports for them so that they can be successful. And as we're doing that, we also need to make sure that we are allowing the individual to take breaks and then to come back to it. Oftentimes what winds up happening is either they're not given those breaks or they're not given enough breaks. And so the child may have a meltdown. You know what? That happens. And I'll be honest, I'm a person without a disability, and there are days I have meltdowns too because I'm just feeling overwhelmed. We don't call that a meltdown when it happens to someone without a disability, but let's be honest, that's what we do, you know. But we need to make sure that we are providing them the appropriate amount of breaks. And so, when they're trying something new, that may mean that they need more breaks. And as they learn things, they may need fewer, and that's great. But we need to give them those breaks and then get them to come back. Okay, we're not just going to let you walk away. It's okay, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we've got to come back and finish this math homework. Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. Then we're going to come back to what we're doing so that we're always coming back to keep trying. And we need to meet the child where they are at and build from there. So, for example, if you want your child to learn how to read, then great. We start by trying to teach them how to read. But if your child doesn't even know their alphabet yet, let alone what sounds those letters make, well, then that's where we start. We don't just start with, a book. We start with those letters and we start with the sounds that the letters make. Even if they're in second or third grade when we're trying this, that's okay. We meet them where they're at and we build up from there. And it's okay if it takes longer to do these things than it does a typical person. I'll be perfectly honest with you. Once you're done with school, the idea of time limits kind of flies out the window. In school, you have to accomplish things within a 1-year period. You don't have to do that in real life. And even with school, you can take longer to learn things. If your child is in algebra, but it's taking them longer to do that, you can actually spread algebra out over the course of 2 years. Now, they still only get, the 2 credits for algebra instead of 4 credits, but schools can do that. They don't necessarily like to do it, but they absolutely can do those things. If you have a child who's in high school and it may take longer than 4 years to graduate, just because you need that 5th year does not mean that you have to give up on earning your high school diploma. You can absolutely spread that out and continue to work toward that high school diploma. So it's okay if it takes longer to learn something. The point is you're still working on learning those skills. You're still making progress. You're still learning, and that's okay. But we also have to insist that everyone around us has high expectations for our loved ones. Because again, if people don't have high expectations, nobody's going to expect things from them. And so they're not going to achieve things. They're not going to learn things. So we need to have those high expectations. And probably the most important thing is that we have to allow our loved ones to make mistakes. Oftentimes, when it comes to people with disabilities, if they don't do something perfectly the very first time, they're never given an opportunity to try it again. And it's often thrown in their face. Well, we tried to let you do that and you weren't able to do it. So you can't try it again. Oh, you missed paid a bill late. So you aren't allowed to manage your money because you paid a bill late. You know what? We all make mistakes. Mistakes are not a bad thing. Mistakes help us learn how to do something better the next time. And is paying a bill late a bad thing? Well, it's not the best, it's not ideal. But if we paid our bills late, does somebody come in and take our money away from us? Of course not. We screwed up, but we do it again. We try again. We do it better the next time. And we have to allow people with disabilities that same opportunity because, again, we learn from our mistakes. We learn from our failures. Fail is not the 4-letter F word we need to worry about. We learn and we have to let people with disabilities try, and we have to let them try again and try again and try again and keep trying again. So don't limit yourself, and most importantly, don't limit your loved one. And we want to provide experiences and opportunities. We want to get people with disabilities involved in the general community as much as possible. Oftentimes, when families are looking for opportunities, without even realizing it, they're looking specifically for opportunities specific to people with disabilities. And goodness knows there's a time and a place for that. There is certainly value in being part of Self Advocates of Indiana and having those peers and having people that you can talk to who have similar life experiences. We all feel that way. But at the same time, why do we have to have a cake decorating class just for people with disabilities? Why can't we go to a cake decorating class for everybody? Why do we have to have um, you know, a a group that knits baby blankets for babies in the NICU that's exclusive for people with disabilities instead of the general public? So we want to make sure that people with disabilities are included in the community as much as possible. And so part of that is identifying what our goals are for our loved ones and giving them chances to try new things and being exposed to different things. So often, especially when it comes to employment, a lot of times people with disabilities are only taught janitorial work or food service or, something along those lines. But they're oftentimes not introduced to other opportunities. And so it's not that somebody can't choose food service or can't choose janitorial work. There are people out there who love to clean. Cleaning gives them peace, and bless them for that, because that is not me at all. So I love that there are people out there like that. But we want to expose them to different experiences and to different opportunities so that they can figure out what they want in life too. And it's about teaching them skills and letting them try and try again and try again and to keep at it. But we also need to make sure that as we're doing this, that we're thinking beyond therapies. And I say this because this is something I screwed up when my son was little. I was so focused on speech and occupational therapy and all of those therapeutic interventions, which goodness knows they're important and they certainly have their place. But I didn't think beyond that. I didn't think about the fact that, story time at the library or, a mommy and me music class could help with speech acquisition. I didn't think about, the train table at the library being a great way to work on social skills. I didn't necessarily think about sports. And yes, we've had my son in sports specifically for individuals with disabilities, but then we've also had him involved with general sports. And you know what? If your 4-year-old is the kid on the soccer field who is picking flowers and looking for four-leaf clovers, who cares? They're 4 years old. He's not going to be the only one, but when we make sure that they're involved with their same age peers, when we make sure they're involved with the general community, first of all, we're helping our loved ones learn how to interact with others. But most importantly, we're also helping other people learn how to interact with individuals with disabilities. When you have a child who may have autism, for example, but at the same time, he's been in baseball and soccer and going to the library with all the other kids, you know, he may do things differently, but oh yeah, that's just Andy, because they've known him their whole lives. They know who he is. They accept him. And I will tell you that little kids have zero tact. So if you're taking your kid to the train table at the library, um, you are going to have another little kid come up to you and say, "What's wrong with him?" The thing is, they don't mean that to be rude. They don't have that judgment. They also just don't have the words. And so part of this is making sure that we're talking to those other kids. Say, "Oh, well, he has autism. That means he needs to learn how to play. Can you help him learn how to play?" And let me tell you, little kids, all they want to do is be helpers. And if you've got a little kid who's in kindergarten and you can find the mommy of the classroom, Let me tell you, you have just hit gold because she's going to take your child's hand and just drag him wherever she goes. So we want to make sure that we're providing those social opportunities, um, especially because social skills actually are a better predictor of eventual life success than even academic skills are. So we want to make sure that we're including them in the general environment as much as humanly possible. And so that means sports, that means community classes, and it means getting involved. And part of that is helping to identify their good life. So the Bureau of Disabilities uses something called the Life Course Framework with all of the individuals that they serve, and the whole idea behind Life Course is that all people, not all people with disabilities, all people have the right to live, love, work, learn, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. And Life Course has a lot of tools to help you figure out what your vision of a good life is and how to get there. And you can find all of their tools, including videos on how to use their tools, at lifecoursetools.com. And so we've got the website up there. And the best part is they are all free. But they also break things down into different life stages. So we've got materials exclusively for early childhood. We've got materials exclusively for school-age children, specifically for transition to adulthood, and then for adulthood and even aging. Because as we grow, our expectations in life grow, our expectations of how to behave and what skills we should have, those all change as we age and as we grow. And so what we want in life changes and grows with our experiences. So they've broken those things down so that you can find materials and resources and tools to help with your specific life stage. And so part of that idea of identifying a good life is identifying what you do want in life, but just as importantly, identifying what you don't want in life. And sometimes that's the easier question to answer is what I don't want in life. It's looking at your child's strengths and assets. It's looking at what resources are available to them. It's about building a network of support, and it's about growing with them. So over on the right-hand side of the screen is part of the Life Course Planning Portfolio. Now, the planning portfolio is actually a two-page tool, and this is part of it. But I love this because it's a cheat sheet to the individual. Because here in this top box, it's what do people like and admire about me? Stop and think about that. Have you ever had that discussion with your loved one? Has anybody ever told them what they like and admire about them? If not, take that opportunity. Tell them all the things that they do that you absolutely love. Whether it's that they've got a great sense of humor, they always make you laugh. Maybe it's that they're such a great helper. Maybe it's that you're so proud of them because you know how hard they try and they keep trying, and you're so proud of them for that. But tell them what you like and admire about them. And we just don't do that enough for people in general. But it's a really powerful thing to do. In that middle box, it's what's important to me. Have you ever asked your child that? A lot of people don't. I mean, and it's more because we don't think about it. We kind of overlook it. But ask your child, hey, what are the things that are important to you? And depending on how old they are, they may tell you different things. They may say that, Bluey is what's important to them, or playing video games. That's okay. Depending on their age, that's totally appropriate. You know, they may tell you friends are important to them. They may tell you that being able to go to work is what's important to them. Part of that kind of depends on the life stage they're in. But ask them, What's important to you? Because that helps guide what we do next. And then in that bottom section is how how do you best support me? You know, so imagine, talk to your loved one. How can you best and ask them, how can I best support you? What are the things you need? What makes your life easier? You know, but imagine filling this out and giving this to your child's teacher right before school begins. Like I said, I call this a cheat sheet to the individual, but this has so much great information that can help that teacher coming up in the next year as this is a brand new student to them. Or maybe you're giving it to a brand new provider or a brand new staff person who's going to be working with your child or a brand new therapist. This lets them know who this child is and how to connect with them, what's important to them, how to support them, and what are the things to celebrate about them. Now, this is the second half of that planning portfolio, and it's called a life trajectory. And this is the version I particularly like. There are a few different versions of this, but what I like is in that top right hand corner, it's what is your vision of a good life? What do you want in life? In the bottom, what do you not want in life? Over on the left-hand side, what are your past experiences that are getting you to your good life? And then what are your experiences that are taking you away from what you want? That middle section, what are the things you still need to be able to get to your good life? What are the things you need to keep an eye on to make sure you're not going toward what you don't want? The first time I sat down and used this with my son, he was a junior in high school. And I had been trying to talk with him about jobs for a while, and the conversations just weren't going anywhere. And so one day I made him come down to the dining room table so that we could talk. And I said, Andy, what's your vision of a good life? And he goes, I don't know. I said, well, what are some of the things you want in life? I don't know. I mean, if the child could have jumped up and run away, he would have. I think he knew he'd have gotten in trouble if he did. But I also knew that if I kept talking to him like that, we weren't going to get anywhere. We still weren't going to get anywhere. So I had to change tactics a little bit. And I said, well, you know what I want in life? I want to go to the movies. And he snapped his head up because he was not expecting an answer like that. Because think about it. How many people would expect an answer like that? You think of those big picture things, not things like going to the movies. And I said, what about you, Andy? Do you want to go to the movies? And he looked at me with so much suspicion, but he was like, yeah. So I wrote down movies. And I said, and I want to go to restaurants. My son does not care about restaurants, so we did not write that down. I said, what about you, Andy? What do you want to be able to do? And he thought for a minute and he goes, I want to go to GameStop. I said, okay. And we wrote down GameStop. And so we started having that conversation. He wanted to be part of Special Olympics. He wanted to make friends. He wanted to play video games. Um, and so we started making that list of the things that were important to him. Going to play laser tag was one of his important things. And eventually we got back to it. And I said, okay, Andy, you want to go to the movies? You want to go to GameStop? You want to play laser tag? What do you need for that? We need money. I said, you're right, you need money. How do you get money? You need a job. I said, you're right, you need a job. What kind of jobs do you think you might want to do? And that's how we were able to have that conversation. And granted, he was in high school, but you know what? You can do some of these things even for little kids or even for individuals who may be older but may have more pronounced disabilities, who may not speak verbally or who may not have, very robust verbal skills. We can still talk about those things because even when somebody doesn't speak verbally, there are things that are important to them. There are things they want in their life. Maybe it's that they want to make sure they can watch the Three Stooges. Maybe it's that they want to make sure they can always go and get a chocolate milkshake. Maybe it's that they want to go swimming each week. They may not be able to verbalize that, but we still know that because we know the individual. And so that's part of their good life. And then we talk about, okay, what are the experiences we've had that are helping us get there? what do we still need to do? And maybe part of that is developing a broader social network. Maybe that's making sure we're setting up um, um, services to help them get to the community pool so that they can go swimming once a week. Maybe that's making sure that they know all the people at the Y so that when they do go swimming, we've got other people who are keeping an eye out on our loved ones. And so it's starting there and having those conversations, but it's also about updating those conversations because these are not one and done sorts of things. And yes, you can think about, that big picture, what is your vision of a good life? And it's about going back and updating that as our experiences change. So, like my son will tell you that eventually he wants to be able to move out on his own. He wants to be able to live independently. Some past experiences he's had that are helping him get there. Well, he went to the Erskine Green Training Institute. So he has lived on his own for a while. So he has learned some of those skills. He knows how to pay his bills. He knows how to do some shopping. But at the same time, moving forward, we need to tighten up some of those skills. We need to work on how do we make an appropriate grocery list? How do we make sure that we're not running out of things and we always have what we need. Goodness knows we don't want to run out of toilet paper. We don't want to run out of our medicine, but sometimes we also have some other things that we can put in place so that if we have somebody um, who doesn't always realize that they're about to run out of medication, maybe that's that we get auto prescription refill put in place. Maybe if we're trying to help somebody learn how to manage money, but they're not quite there yet, maybe that's setting up auto bill pay. And so there are also things that we need to think about beyond disability, and think about what resources are out there just in general to help make sure that people can have the life they want to live. And when we're talking about somebody who is newly diagnosed, it's thinking about, okay, what skills do you have right now? What are the things you still need to develop? What are the things you want out of life? And how do we make sure that you get there? So, one way to do that is through a Medicaid waiver. A Medicaid waiver is a combination of both Medicaid health coverage and support services that a lot of times health insurance doesn't typically cover. The thing with a Medicaid waiver is that family income and family assets are not considered. They look at the child's income and the child's assets. And here in Indiana, we have two different types of Medicaid waivers. We have our skilled nursing waivers, which are designed to help keep people at home instead of going into a nursing home. I will tell you, if you have not already heard, there are a lot of changes coming to those skilled nursing waivers. And so, there's still a lot of confusion and a lot of concern that families have when it comes to those skilled nursing waivers. It's currently called the Aged and Disabled or the Traumatic Brain Injury Waiver, and it will become either the Health and Wellness waiver, or if somebody's over age 60, the Pathways for Aging waiver, and then the Traumatic Brain Injury waiver, still keeping the same name, but still going through a few changes. And then we have the Developmental Disabilities waivers, and those have a very different focus. Their purpose is to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities get out and be as active in the community as possible. And so part of that is also teaching independence, teaching those independent living skills, cooking, cleaning, managing money, caring for their health, and doing so in an age appropriate way. And, so that might mean, having your 4-year-old help you sort laundry, and you can be teaching colors all at the same time. Maybe it's, teaching that 2-year-old how to put their toys away because when they're that little, all they want to do is help. And we can make that into a game. And before you think, man, she's got it going on, she's thinking of all these things. No, I didn't. I screwed that part up. I'm sharing this with you so that you can learn from my mistakes because I didn't do those things. And so, at least when my son was younger. And so now we're going through and we're doing those things now. And so it's teaching them how to clean, how to do laundry. It's teaching them how to cook. And that can be as simple as, making a sandwich. But at the same time, You can also be teaching them how to cook and working on other skills. So, for example, when my son was young, we did cook quite a bit together. And I used to say, "Oh, well, we're doing our occupational therapy homework while we made chocolate chip cookies." Because you know what? We were working on those fine and gross motor skills as we were stirring those chips into the batter. Um, and cooking is a great way to work on reading skills and math skills and cultural skills. And I am convinced that you can teach any subject other than IT through cooking. But that's also because I used to be a cooking teacher, you know. But you can make it fun and seriously, if you can find an excuse to make chocolate chip cookies and claim you're doing therapy or claim you're doing math homework, hey man, you did great. My son used to, when he was little and we were working on math skills, we had a game called Pizza Party Bingo, where we were working with fractions, just using, pictures of pizzas to work on fractions to help make that a little bit more concrete. Things like managing money, showing them that, hey, when we go to the store, you know, these numbers, that's how much these things cost. And then we pay for those things, teaching them things like when you go out to dinner, you leave a tip for the server who brought you your food and who kept your drinks refilled. Um, Teaching them to care for their health. So oftentimes, especially when it comes to the medical profession, they don't necessarily talk to the patient, especially when they have a disability. They talk to whoever brought them. So when your child's doctor asks, "Does Jenny's tummy hurt?" Make a big production. "Well, I don't know, Jenny. Does your tummy hurt?" To remind that doctor, hey, this is your patient. You need to ask them, because what that does is that helps reinforce that concept of equality, that this is a person who is worth talking to, that is worthy of respect, who is equal, and that they are valuable. So we need to reinforce those ideas sometimes. Um, but also that teaches our kids that their opinion matters, that what they think matters, and that they have the right to speak up, even when they're talking to a doctor, even when they're talking to a banker, even when they're talking to a teacher. I see a question that has come in, so I'm going to stop to look at that. Um, so this is from Dan, who's saying that he really likes these resources, and that he recommends, reaching out to some local organizations, including local chapters of the ARC, for additional resources, and especially some of those local resources that make such a huge difference. We also want to teach our loved ones confidence, and we want to teach them empowerment, reinforce that idea that they are worthy, they are valuable, and they have the right to expect to be treated with respect. And we also have to teach them decision making. And that's one of those things that tends to fly under the radar a lot. And especially even when we're talking about little kids, even when we're talking about 4-year-olds, we need to teach them how to make their own decisions. And again, this is something that I didn't do when my son was young because I didn't think about it. It was just easier for me to do all of these things. Just like when your kids are little, it's easier for you to tie their shoes rather than wait 20 minutes while they try to tie their own shoes. But eventually we've got to teach them how to tie their own shoes. And so we also have to teach them how to make decisions. And that starts by giving them choices. And so when somebody is new to decision making, we may give them limited choices. Do you want to wear a blue shirt or a green shirt? When my son was really little, I'd ask him, do you want to be Batman or Superman? Because those were the t-shirts he would have. Or do you want to be Bruce Wayne or Clark Kent? So he would get to choose, how he wanted to dress each day. And then as he grew, those choices grew. Do you want to have a toasted cheese sandwich? Do you want to have a peanut butter sandwich? Do you want to have an apple or do you want to have an orange? so that they learn how to make choices. But we don't always want to just stay with those binary either or choices. Eventually, we want to get to the point where we're making it more open-ended, not just do you want a toasted cheese sandwich or do you want a peanut butter sandwich, but what do you want for lunch today? But then we want their decision making to grow as their skills grow. And part of that is having conversations with them about decisions that you make so that they learn how to make decisions and so that they learn values and that you share your values with them. And so part of that is talking about when it's time to make a decision, what is the information we need to make that decision? And my background is believe it or not in journalism, and so I always go back to the 5 W's and H: who, what, when, where, why, and how. It's a great place to start. And even at 4 years old, we can we need to teach kids how to make decisions. And part of that is, how do we get the information we need to make a decision? What's the information we need to find out? Who can we go to get reliable information? Because that's something that we don't often think about teaching people, and making it concrete. When I have a question about my medicine, I can talk to the pharmacist. I can talk to my doctor. I can talk to the nurse. When I need to when I need to get information about money, I can go talk to somebody at the bank. And part of that means also broadening up that network of support so that you're taking your child actually into the bank and introducing them to the tellers, and you're seeing them on a regular basis so that when your child is older and they're managing their own money, and if they have questions or if there's a problem or something comes up, well, everybody at the bank already knows them. So when they come in and say, I need help. I've got a question. They'll say, "Sure, Jenny, what's going on? Come on over." And they'll sit down with them and work it out. Um, and so it's helping identify, who can I go to for reliable information. I tend to joke, I saw it on Facebook is not necessarily a reliable source, but especially if we're talking younger kids, they're not on Facebook anyway. That totally dates me by even saying that. But but who are the reliable sources we can go to? I mentioned that I also have a 17-year-old son who does not have disabilities, and he and I go round and round over Wikipedia because to him, Wikipedia is a reliable source. To me, it is not. So we need to teach them how to evaluate that information. And that's where we also share our values in how we're evaluating information. And then make that decision. And to me, the hardest part about this is respecting their decision, especially when I don't agree with it. Because you know what? We may not always agree with the decisions they make. Guess what? Our parents don't agree with all of the decisions we make either, but we expect them to respect the decisions we make, and we need to give that same respect to our children. And when we're talking about, say, that 4-year-old, we may limit those choices. No, you don't get to have cake for breakfast. You know what? How many of us do that as adults? Somebody brings in donuts to the office or coffee cake or something like that. Guess what? It's still cake, you know. But at 4 years old, we help them make age appropriate decisions, you know. But we also need to be talking to them about what's going on in their lives so that they're learning, so that as they grow, they can have more input on their lives and on their decisions. If we're talking about an 8-year-old, and maybe we're talking about, hey, what types of activities do you want to be involved with? Do you want to play baseball? Do you want to be part of Scouts? Do you want to join the Pokemon Club at the library? Those are decisions that they can absolutely make as they keep growing and getting older, and our expectations of them change because our expectations for a 15-year-old are very different than our expectations for a 5-year-old. But as they grow, we've been teaching them all along how to make decisions, and by respecting their decisions, That shows them that everybody else should be respecting their decisions as well. And so we want to teach them confidence. We want to teach them empowerment. And we want to teach them self-advocacy and that they have the right to speak up and they have the right to expect to be respected. And that doesn't always mean that people will agree with them, but they have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. And so at this point, I want to open it up. I want to ask you, what are your questions? What are the things that you're dealing with right now? You know, you know, what are you trying to figure out how to help your child with those next steps? So please, by all means, you can put things in the Q&A. I think you could probably put them in the chat as well. So I'm gonna let people have a moment to be able to add their thoughts into this. And what are the decisions that what are the things you're trying to help your loved one learn? What are the things you're struggling with right now? What are the things that maybe you struggled with when your child was first diagnosed and you figured it out, or you've learned? Here's the thing: none of us are perfect, and there are always going to be new things to learn. And I tend to joke the only constant in all the things that we deal with is wait a few years, it all changes. But you know what? We can keep growing and we can keep learning. And we need to make sure that our loved ones are given every opportunity possible. We need to make sure that our loved ones get to have a good life and recognizing that their vision of a good life may be different from ours. Again, our vision of a good life is probably different from what our parents wanted for us too. But we got that dignity to make our own choices, and our kids need that as well. But part of our jobs as parents or as family members is to help guide them in that, to help them learn how to make decisions, to help them learn that they deserve to be valued and respected, and that they deserve opportunities. So I'm getting a few more questions. Um, my Saturday, uh, my Saturday group did a cooking class that was for anybody, not just for poor people with a disability. I love that. And I love that for a few reasons. Okay, first of all, like I said, I used to be a cooking teacher, so I love the idea of teaching people to cook. And I grew up in a family where everybody cooked. So, you know, it took me a while to realize that not everybody had that, but that's something that we all need. We need, this is a basic life skill. This is not a gender specific skill. This is not something, that we can overlook. We have to know how to cook so that we can survive. But at the same time, that's a skill everybody needs. So I love the idea of making those cooking classes that are open to everyone. And also sharing ideas because we do have a lot of individuals with disabilities um, who who may not have the most money out there. Maybe they're only on SSI, maybe they have food stamps. And how do we maximize that? How do we make sure that they learn how to buy enough food and how to cook that food so that they're able to enjoy and have a good life? And then also, how do we make sure that we're making sure that they can work so that maybe they're not on food stamps, so that maybe they're not on SSI, maybe they've switched to SSDI, but they've got enough money to live comfortably. Um, Dan saying, I encourage families to be open-minded and to try things, to take some risks as your child has great potential to have a good life. Dan, I could not agree with you more on that. Um, you know, and I'll be honest, as a parent, it's scary to do that. And especially, when we're talking about things like, you know, getting them involved in community activities, especially when they're young. When all we want to do is wrap them up and protect them from the world, the thing is, the way we protect our kids is by making sure that they're exposed to opportunities, to make sure that they are around other people so that they know how to interact with other people and so that other people know how to interact with them. And so we want to make sure that they have all of those opportunities. Any other questions? Well, in that case, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to encourage you, if you have questions, if you want to talk through your specific situation, maybe you've got a child who's in grade school and you're struggling with the school system trying to figure out how do I make sure that my child is getting an appropriate education and has every opportunity possible? Or maybe you're trying to figure out, what resources are out there. Give us a call here at the ARC. You can talk with any one of our family advocates. Every single one of us is either a parent, a self advocate, or a sibling. So we all live this life too. Give us a call at 317-977 2375 and talk through with us. Um, and if you're anything like me, you're going to think of something 3 weeks from now. Go ahead and give us a call. We're always here. And it doesn't have to be about this, it can be about anything. We're here to help however we can. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining tonight. Um, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.